Welcome, everyone. To begin, I'll ask Doreen Point Lespet to offer opening prayer.
Mhm. Good morning, everyone. Jahatanapich. Jahjaj Kshetegus Hegetus Chichia and Kukpa. Paisotich Metumus Leachtet. Jahja such Uktam Hahnatum Soatum plus Hahnatum Gidje Hegetus Elton Hegetus Aya and Paya. Hahnatum Dagum Hahagatum was Hohuatas Uktam Papa. Hahnatum Dagum Heget Kusen Arjumish Papwatet. Jahja such Hahnatum to store Hegetus Quiten. It's quite na Papaistana Pet. I'm happy to be here today. My name is Doreen Point, and I'm doing the Truth and Reconciliation Prayer. Creator, great-grandfather, and great-grandmothers, we thank you for the safe journey through the night. We give you thanks for the gifts that surround us, for the gift of the land that gives us food, shelter, and water, for the gift of the sun that gives us warmth and light to all that grows, for the gift of the moon and stars which you have arranged in your glory, for the gifts of our culture and our language. We share our values that you have engraved in our hearts. Creator, we pray and lift up the lives of the 7,912 children who died in Indian residential school across Canada. We grieve the loss of so many little ones whose fates were unknown to those who held them most dear. We grieve the loss of all these children from our communities, children of our land. Creator, we ask blessings for hundreds of thousands of grandparents who were denied their proper role of sharing the culture, language, and spirituality with their grandchildren who never made it home. Every child matters. Creator, pour your healing and love over all who suffered in Canada's Indian residential school. Our minds, our bodies, and spirits wounded through abuse. Our hearts wounded through disdain and separation. Our families wounded through anguish and trauma that still torment us over the course of generations. Creator, we offer you our sorrow. We offer you desire to walk with our First Nations brothers and sisters. We ask you to journey with us for reconciliation and peace. Creator, give us flaming hearts that beat with the drum to defend and honor our Indigenous language and way of life. Make us stewards of one another's dignity, of one another's safety, of one another's land, of one another's right to cultural identity as unique peoples, as gifts to our families, and as to our beloved children. Now we turn our thoughts to the Creator and send greetings and thanks for the gifts of creation. Everything we need to live a good life is here on this Mother Earth. For all the love that is still around us, we gather our minds together as one and send our choicest words of greetings and thanks to the Creator. Now our minds are one. All my relations.
Thank you, Elder Doreen. I'll pass it on to Lisa just to explain, why we're here today and what we hope to do with this Q&A session.
Thank you, Trina. So Trina and I are the consultants that have been hired by the Joint Working Group to guide the community through this process and co-design it with you. And so throughout the whole process, since we went public with engagement events in March, we've been hearing a number of questions that we wanted to address. And so, across the survey and the open mic events and the open houses and invitation events that we've gone into different communities. So different events with youth, with other organizations across the city. we've collected all of these questions. And so we thought it would be a great way to wrap up this phase of engagement by answering all the questions, as well as dispel some of the misinformation that's been circulating around Facebook. So you're hearing it from the organizers and from the Joint Working Group today. And thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks all. I think we'll, I'll pass it over to Mayor Formosa to acknowledge the land that we're on today.
Well, welcome everyone. Welcome community members, Joint Working Group, Honored Elder. We're holding this meeting today within the traditional territory of our friends and neighbors, and also third local government from Savory Island. So thank you for allowing us to have our meetings within the traditional territory, the Tla'amin First Nation, and accepting this whole process. Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor. Also on the call today, we have, in addition to Mayor Formosa and Elder Doreen and Lisa and myself, we have Russell Brewer, who is the CAO for the City of Powell River, Chief Administrative Officer. And we also have Eric Blaney, legislator with the Tla'amin Nation. So welcome to both of you. So before we dive into questions, Cheche Hatanapesht, we welcome you all. And some of the topics that we'll address today is about where this request for a possible name change came from, what the process is for making the decision, how much it might cost, some name change logistics for individuals and businesses, and where people can find more information. And we'll get into a number of more specific questions throughout. So let's pass the first question over to Eric Blaney. Where did this request come from?
Yeah, thank you. And just like to start by thanking Doreen for the beautiful prayer to set us off in the good way today. Where this question came from, or where this request came from, is it didn't start as a request. It was put on the agenda at one of the first 3C meetings that we had with the city and the regional district when this new group of leadership joined. And the request was more of a discussion point that we were bringing to the table, that giving some history and some context of who Powell was, that it was something that we wanted to start working on and something that we started to discuss with the city of Powell River. So the first meeting, it was more of a discussion point than an actual request. And then what had happened is very shortly after our 3C meeting, the 215 unmarked graves were found at the Tecumloops residential school. And at that point, there was a discussion around how residential schools came to be and how those unmarked graves came to be, and why were there unmarked graves located outside a residential school. So there was a lot of discussion in the community, in the province, across Canada, about the implications of residential schools on Indigenous people. And Tla'amin, having people from our community who went to Tecumloops, it struck a chord, because it's something that our people, our elders, and our residential school survivors have been telling us all along about the horrors that they lived through and the atrocities that they had to live through going to these residential schools. So there was a lot of pressure put on us, and there was a lot of discussion around Israel Powell and what his role was in creating residential schools and how they've impacted our community and still impacts us today. So, you know, the discussion looking at, you know, our place names in our territory have never changed for us. They only changed when, you know, the city was incorporated. And just like myself, my traditional name is Tiapthot, and that's the name that I choose to use with my community. But for tax purposes, I'm Eric Blaney, right? So the name change discussion came about at a 3C meeting. It was an agenda item that was put on the agenda to discuss that, it's not something we were looking at jumping on right. And there was not the bandwidth or the horsepower to take that on. But when those children were found that did not have a voice, it was quite apparent that we needed to tackle it at that point in time. And there is no good time, and there is no work plan for reconciliation. You have to tackle it as leadership as it comes at you. And that was, I think, the fire that ignited this discussion and set us on this path to try and right past wrongs and to try and I acknowledge what Israel Powell did to our people, and not just our people, but Indigenous people across Canada. And we're still living with those atrocities today. And just by having that, our community named after somebody who played such a significant role in the destruction of our culture, the destruction of our people, and to this day, we're still living with those issues. That, the time was now, and it wasn't on our agenda to deal with it. It came about quite organically, and we had to give those 215 children a voice. And that's kind of what we're doing right now as Indigenous leaders with our community, is giving those children a voice. And now the number is over 10,000. I was just in Kamloops. I went to the 1-year anniversary, and it was very powerful to sit with survivors who actually went to that school and who shared information with us on what they lived through. And it really solidified in my heart and mind that this is right for us. This has to be done. And this is something that a major wrong, I think, that needs to be reconciled with our people in our territory. So in a long way, that's how this came about.
Thank you so much for sharing. Appreciate you explaining more about the request and how it originated and what the timing was. Really important for people to understand. So the next question is for Mayor Famosa. Why are we focusing on conversation and information sharing? Why is there a joint working group? Why are we doing it this way?
Thank you, Trina, for those questions. Yeah, you heard Legislator Eric's response to your question, how he remembers us coming to this point. I agree with his statements. Where it became a serious situation for the city of Powell River was at the 3C meeting, which is the three governments, the Klamath people, the Qathat Regional District, and the city of Powell River. When the new leadership came into play, I believe on our second meeting, we received a formal letter from Hegus John Hackett asking the city, under the community accord protocol agreements that we have between us, if we would consider the possibility of a name change in consideration of the hurt and feelings that the elders, the families of the elders that attended residential school, and the whole community feels when they hear the word Powell. And that was that whole situation towards the feeling of that name Powell was expressed more vividly when the Kamloops students' situation came more to light. Some of us were aware of these things in the past, and some of us were not. Through the Kamloops situation and all the media, it sped up the process, as you heard from Eric. So through the community accord and through our protocol agreements, we have agreed, and this has gone back more than, I would say, 17 years, 14 years that I've been here, and it was there prior to myself, and it was renewed by myself and Hegus Clint Williams and our councils about 4 years ago. We took their request to heart, And we went to council and then met with the Tla'amin legislators in group, and through the C3, we agreed that we should put together a committee from our side, the City of Powell River and the Tla'amin side. And terms of reference was created by the city and then passed over to Tla'amin to review. And then we went out with that terms of reference, and we sent an invitation to the community of Powell River at large, i.e. the city of Powell River at large, and asked for 2 citizen folks to see if they would step forward and be part of this committee. We did not receive a lot of applications, but we received a good number, and we chose 2 participants, Lynn Admonson and Stuart Elsgard. And so basically, we felt that we needed to have an in-depth conversation with our community. We understood that it would be a tough process, especially coming out of 3 years of COVID and penned up emotions. And we thought we needed to have a good long conversation about the possibility of a name change. It was discussed. It does not have to be a native name. It does not have to be a name that's hard to pronounce. But our friends feel hurt when they hear the name Powell, because they go back to Israel Powell, who was doing a job at the time, but it's felt that, you know, he was the implicator of these rules and laws, and maybe added to or not. I don't know. I'm not a historian. I'm learning a lot as we go. But the potluck disappeared. The children disappeared to these residential schools. The language disappeared. Their villages disappeared. And so they just don't want to hear the name Powell. And we understand their feelings. And so through the community accord, we're following through with that request. And we feel we need to have a robust conversation with our city residents, because it affects them as well. It is their name as well as others. We know that people get attached to things like names, and there's a lot of value in a name, given the hard work that the city has done to attract folks and to attract industry and such. And so we are on this process. I do not feel it should be rushed. I know that Haida Gwaii took 3 years doing their process to decide whether they wanted a name change or not. So anyways, we, through our terms of reference, went out and sent out an RFP for contractor. And we decided to hire 2 contractors, Lisa Moffat and Trina Iverson. Sorry, Trina? Isaacson. And they have been leading us and helping us create the process and the venues and all the things that we're doing today. And we really take our hats off to those wonderful ladies, because this has not been an easy journey. I believe it is starting to get better and somewhat easier and more understood as the education process is passed on, and we're now into the communication process. And I'm hoping that after the communication process, we could go back again and look at the education process, so that now that people have had a chance to share, some of those that maybe went to the open houses and didn't understand why they couldn't speak about what they wanted to, and it was about education, that maybe now they may go back and have a look at the educational pieces and to understand why the city and why Tla'amin are undertaking this process. I hope that answers your questions, Trina.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Formosa. We will get into a couple of details that you mentioned a little bit later, and happy to provide more context for those. But yeah, really appreciate your time providing context on the community accord and, you know, why we're in conversation. It's not an easy question for many people, and so we just need to spend some time on it. And I wanted to mention, you mentioned the Haida Gwaii took 3 years. It was the village of Queen Charlotte, I think maybe you're thinking about.
Yes,
yeah, okay. that recently took that step to change it.
And I was just up there a few years ago, and I guess I relate Haida Gwaii and Queen Charlotte's as sort of one. Before I sign off my part, I want to thank the Joint Working Group. I want to thank the community. I want to thank the contractors. And I would like to thank our 2 elders, Doreen Point and Stuart Elsgard, who is one of our community folks that is part of the process. But at the first meetings, when Elder Doreen Point attended, I asked her if she would become our elder in residence, and she accepted, and what a blessing it's been. So thank you very much, Doreen. I know it's been a little tough on you, but I also know that you have told me that it's really helped in your journey of healing through the residential school so far, and that you're able to manage the pain of reliving your childhood. And I just want to thank you on behalf of the citizens of the City of Powell River in general. Thank you very much, Doreen.
Great. We have a next question coming up for CAO Russell Brewer. What is the process for making a decision?
And you can see from the slide before you, as the mayor mentioned, we're currently in the process of engaging with the public through the joint working group. The next step from there, expected sometime in July, would be a report out from the joint working group to council, and council will have to make a decision, and I'll get into some more details here shortly on whether to proceed or not with a name change. Should they wish to do so, request would then go to the province, and I'll provide some details on what that looks like. So when the request first came in, we did reach out to the province, and they outlined what some of the requirements are for a municipality. Changing the name ultimately does fall under the provincial jurisdiction, although the province does see municipality considering a name change as being driven by the local community, hence the joint working group, and hence the decision by council to proceed with a name change or not. So the City of Powell River is unique in that it was incorporated under the Powell River Incorporation Act. Most other municipalities are established under letters patent. So changing the city's name must be changed by the province through an order in council and legislation to amend the Incorporation Act and the letters patent. Before the province considers the name change, they expect that local government has some meaningful public engagement process regarding the name change, including establishing a rationale for the change, providing public notice of the intent to request a legal name change, and undertaking public consultation where they engage with the public and receive feedback from the electorate. Also expected, of course, is that the city is engaged with Tla'amin Nation, stakeholders, rights holders, and other agencies such as the regional district. The regular procedural rules, when it comes to the point where a council needs to make a decision on whether to proceed or not, the regular procedural rules would apply as with any other council committee meeting or council meeting. And the expectation is that would occur as part of the regular deliberations at a council meeting after the joint working group delivers their report, expected sometime in July at this point. Once the city has completed all the above I mentioned, and if they chose to proceed, they would have to formally write to the Minister of Municipal Affairs asking the province to formalize a name change. They would have to provide as part of that a summary of the public engagement that was undertaken, a list of everyone consulted, conclusions of that consultation, and a summary of the results. There would also need to be a public notice and a council resolution indicating support for a name change. Based on the request and the supporting info provided by the city, the minister would determine whether to recommend amending the letters patent, i.e. changing the name of the city, to cabinet, which has the final authority to make the changes. So hopefully that helps answer the question a little bit on what the process would look like for making a decision on the name change.
Thanks, Russell. Because the next question is for Russell as well. Will there be a referendum? What does a referendum fit into the this process that you mentioned?
This is obviously a decision of council, and they would have to deliberate and weigh options as to whether a referendum or some other voting process would be considered. However, the province has indicated there's no legislative requirements for a referendum or other voting process to demonstrate community support for a name change. So in short, that's the answer. That's yet to be deliberated by council.
So the next question is, what would the process be for choosing a name? And this has been assigned to me to answer. And the short answer is we don't know yet. It would obviously involve ongoing collaboration with the nation and public engagement to explore possibilities. Using some language from the original letter from Hey Goose John Hackett, he writes, in the spirit of reconciliation and cut that, the translation of that is working together. Let's find a more respectful and inclusive name that is more reflective of both the oral history of these lands and the present day collaborative communities. And so this would be something that would be decided in the future, but we don't know yet what the process would be for choosing a name. And this goes into the next question that Lisa can share. What are the potential names? So I think there's been some misinformation that the options are Powell River or T-Squat, T-Squat being the original name for the actual river of Powell River, the Ayajutham name, T-Squat meaning big river. And so just to be very clear, no name has been chosen. There's no decision about a potential name choice. This process is about exploring support for a possible name change. And again, as I had mentioned previously, Haig suggested that a name might be more representative of everyone here and our shared values. But there is no specific name on the table that's being chosen between, as the mayor mentioned previously. The name may not be in Ayajutham being the language that Tla'amin speak along with their sister nations. And so the shorter answer is we don't know. There's no specific list of names that are being decided among right now. It's exploring support for a possible name change. The next question is back to Russell. How much is this process costing the city? What would it be the cost to the city if the name is changed?
Thanks, Trina. So the city and Tla'amin each allocated $20,000 to provide funding to support the engagement. And any additional funding has been provided through grants. So we've been fortunate to get grants from the various provincial agencies to support the work. So to date, $20,000 each from the city and Tla'amin Nation. If we were to proceed with a name change, costs for implementing a name change in other jurisdictions have ranged anywhere from approximately $50,000 to $100,000 roughly. And that includes the engagement leading to a name change. However, a lot of those costs really can be spread out over a number of years as items need replacing, right? It doesn't all have to happen at once. You know, signage, vehicle decals, supplies, etc., can just be replaced as required. So that minimizes the cost. Some of the greater cost implications are likely really staff time and resources through the engagement and formal name change process itself. So I think that answers that question.
Thanks, Russell. Next question also for Russell. How would we have to change our documents? How much will this cost residents in particular?
Yeah, those are good questions. I would also encourage folks to check the city's website if they have time, because there's info on there as well, but I'll run through some of that here for everyone. And for the most part, those costs are estimated to be minimal, although we recognize obviously most businesses and residents would have in-kind costs in the way of their time and energy having to take steps to update some information. But I'll run through some of them here. So in terms of BC driver's license and BC ID, this is free and done through the phone, in person, or online. And if a name change were to happen, an address change sticker would be sent out. And when it's time for ID renewal, just regular renewal, a new card with updated name would be provided as part of a renewed card. And folks would simply pay the regular renewal fee at that time. As far as passports and birth certificates, there's no need to update your address, as a change of address does not invalidate your passport. And so folks don't have to worry about that. Birth certificate remains the same. I was born in St. Boniface, which later became part of Winnipeg. My birth certificate is still fine. I'm still born in St. Boniface. And in fact, on your passport, they do provide an option for you to actually cross out your address and update your address right within your passport as well. So there's info on the Government of Canada's site about that. For Canada Post, address changes are free. Canada Post would make the change to their addressing system when provided with an order in council or a resolution from municipal council. So residents don't have to change anything right away there. Within residents and businesses within a municipal boundary affected by the change would also receive 1 year of free mail forwarding while they let contacts and customers know of address changes, right? Obviously, there'll be some changes required for certain businesses or subscriptions or what have you, but no cost there for the first year.
And just to clarify on that point, Russell, that would be residents would have to update like their address with their bank or utility companies?
Yeah, that kind of thing, or say magazine subscriptions or other memberships, those kind of things. But the mail forwarding would be done automatically. So that gives folks a lot of time to do it. And that goes back to my earlier comment. We know there's going to be some work required on the part of folks, the time and energy to make some of those changes, but at least there's no cost associated with that. For Land Title and Survey Authority, we've heard some questions about that. Costs associated with those updates are free or automatic, as the case may be. And the Land Title Survey Authority updates their database after being notified by the municipality for those changes. I think that covers the residents' question.
Yeah. Yeah. The next question is for business owners. How would a name change impact business owners? What would the cost be? Yeah,
that's also minimal, really, in terms of business registry. So it costs $20 to update the registered and records office information for a company, and $15 for a society also, because there would be updates required for a business registry there. But also there may be potential costs for businesses that might want to update promotional material or websites or signage where the name might be included. So again, a recognition there that there may be time and effort required on the part of business owners to change some material if required, but the filing fee of $20 is that fixed cost required for the business registry for business owners.
And I just want to clarify that businesses are not being asked to update or change their business names. That would be up to individual business owners if they chose to do that. So, I think for businesses, this is a values-based decision on if they choose to change their name or not, if the city also chooses to change its name.
Yeah, the business registry would be related to just the address change required.
The nation did reach out to the Chamber of Commerce and offer the opportunity to perhaps supply funding to support businesses that have costs associated with a name change. And so that also is out there as a possibility to acknowledge the costs and something that the nation has offered through the Chamber of Commerce. So the next question that we hear at some of the events, because we do share information about Dr. Israel Powell at the events, and some people want to know, what about the good that Israel Powell did? And I'll pass it over to Lisa to answer it.
Thanks, Trina. So, we do want to acknowledge that Dr. Israel Powell was the first superintendent of Indian Affairs. And, that was an influential role for somebody to have back in the day. And in that role, he pursued a number of policies. Some could be viewed as positive. For example, he did secure water rights for some interior nations, and he did advocate for larger reserves. However, this conversation is about not his intent or the intent of Indian Affairs, but the impacts that those decisions had, and specifically the impacts to the Tla'amin Nation, which were negative. So while Israel Wood Powell didn't implement residential schools, he was a strong advocate for them, and specifically advocated for a residential school in the interior, which became the residential school in Kamloops or at Kamloops, where some Tla'amin children were sent. He also banned potlatches and just I know we talk about potlatch and some people might not understand what that is, but the potlatch really is a complex function of traditional Coast Salish governance rooted in protocol. So a potlatch serves many functions in the lives of Coast Salish peoples. In Tla'amin territory, there are 4 different kinds of ceremonies that are housed under the umbrella term potlatch. So it's a form of record keeping. Families would invite other families and villages to bear witness and to remember important family events and ceremonies. It's important to acknowledge that each potlatch is held for a different reason. So some centrally important aspects and reasons for the potlatch include wealth distribution, legal proceedings, marriages, memorials, naming ceremonies, and resource management. They often involve singing and drumming, dancing, storytelling, speeches, and gift giving. This typically was in the form of objects such as blankets and medicines or food, as well as games were played. So the potlatch is central in upholding the practices of oral histories and oral knowledge sharing. And Powell, coming back to Israel Powell, he did discourage the surveying of Tla'amin land when the Indian reserves were set up. And he supported the sale of timber leases of Lot 450, which forced Tla'amin people away from their village sites. So while Powell may have held regular view for his day, his work has impacted Tla'amin people's connection to land, culture, language, and families, the repercussions of which are still held today. And so Powell represented a system of rules and laws that were created by Europeans and benefited European people who settled here. And there was no consultation with First Nations or other Indigenous communities about these decisions or the impacts to those communities because of these decisions.
Thanks, Lisa. And the next question is for you as well. It's about the survey results that were done earlier this year in March. There was a community-wide survey, paper and online. And the question is, why haven't the survey results been released? Will they be released?
So the survey results really were not intended as a vote. We were clear on the online and hard copy surveys that the input would be used to design engagement activities. And this statement was on both, and I quote, "Through this survey, we hope to gain a better understanding of what you are currently feeling about a possible name change, what you want to learn more about, what questions you might have, what conversations you might want to be part of, if you are aware of related resources to share." And then the statement continues, "We will use this information from your responses to create materials, resources, and events to help us have this conversation." So we did ask people what they wanted to talk about and how, and we created engagement events that did that. So in addition to meeting the project objectives around sharing information about what reconciliation looks like, what the impacts of colonialism have been and continue to be for Tla'amin people, how to have conversations in ways that build unity and pride, talking about the importance of place names, and sharing information about what justice and action looks like. We've reached some of those objectives in the activities that you've seen to date. And it really is a decision of the Joint Working Group what parts of our report will be made public. So we'll share that information with you as it becomes available to us.
And just to be clear, another purpose of the survey was to get a sense of who we were reaching and who we weren't through the survey in particular. And so some people have asked, like, why did you ask about income and income and age and things like that in the survey? Because the survey was completely anonymous, we don't know who answered the questions, but we have a sense of who we reached and who we didn't. And we learned, for example, in that survey, we didn't reach younger people very well. And we also didn't reach people who had lower household incomes very well. And so that helped us determine some of the outreach activities that we did later on. So for example, we've been spending some time focusing on engaging younger people, but we missed some groups. Not everyone has had a chance necessarily to learn about or be involved in the engagement process, and so these will be part of our recommendations to the Joint Working Group about like what next steps might take.
And I think that raises a good point about lower income communities tend to be more vulnerable communities, and their priorities are meeting basic needs, and so they are more difficult groups to reach, and we didn't do a good job of reaching them as part of in this phase of the engagement, and so we do look forward to connecting with them at potential future engagement opportunities.
So the next question is for me. Will there be more public engagement or more opportunities to discuss? And so this is a little bit of a to be determined question. There will likely be future engagement events, but future opportunities haven't been determined yet. So the current work of Lisa and I goes until the end of June. The joint working group, their term goes until the end of July, and at which point they'll report to Council and Nation. And so for this phase of the process, public engagement is almost complete. We know that there's interest in other ways of being engaged. So we know there's interest in small group discussion and exploration, and we haven't had time to do that. And we acknowledge that that's really important for some people who don't feel comfortable speaking in public or want to find like a less tense way of engaging in this topic. And so we know that. We also know that there's interested in, making sure that the historical facts are clear and accurate. There's an interest in maybe having a historian speak to some of the historical facts that people seem to disagree about. And so these are things that we will consider for the future, and we didn't get to in this phase of the work. We acknowledge that. And so there's a lot of to be determined what recommendations the joint working group has for a possible future public engagement will come by the end of July when they report back to Council and the Nation. All right, so that is the end of our overarching questions. We know we didn't get to all the questions that you have today, so we can use the question and answers from this session to perhaps create a written version of the Q's and A's, but we wanted to address some of the major common questions that we get. And I'll pass it back off to Lisa to finish off the presentation.
Thanks, Trina. So we do have a website that's been live since March 1st, and there's a ton of valuable information there, and you find that at powellriver.ca/PNC. There's a resources page. There's information about who sits on the joint working group. There's information about all the engagement events. What am I missing? Well, there's a landing page where you can sign up for the project email update list as well, or you can just email us directly at pnc@powellriver.ca, and that's a regularly monitored email address, and we receive all of your correspondence and your questions through that. And then we do have just a couple of upcoming events. So this will be aired on Facebook, on the city's Facebook and the Tla'amin public Facebook on May 30th, and you can rewatch it and share it from there. On June 1st, we have the last public event for this space. So it's another open mic roundtable event. It's from 7 to 10 at the Evergreen Theater at the Recreation Complex. And then we have a consultants report due to the joint working group in late June. And as we've mentioned throughout this session, the joint working group will then take our report and make recommendations to council, anticipated for sometime in July.
Elder Doreen Point Lespet to close this out in a good way today.
Okay, I'm going to take you out to about 2002 when I wrote this prayer for my son, Bruce. I called it For All My Relations. Lord Jesus, our creator and great-grandmothers and great-grandfathers, I pray for my family that you will make them strong spiritually. I pray for those who are misguided. Send your love and protection to them, even if they have said bitter things to me, for it is they who are in trouble now, not me. I pray for your guidance, that at the end of the day, I will come to understand I'm responsible for my own decisions and others for theirs. Creator, help me to deal with the fear that is trying to spread itself in me, and do not allow anger to penetrate my mind. Creator, I ask for you to help me remain the beacon of light for my people. Let them see that I carry their burden and I'm trying to protect the family line. I pray that their gloating words of winning will not touch me, and I ask that you do not give them power over me that they do not have. Creator, I pray for the elders, the sick, the lonely, the depressed, and the disabled. Give them strength and hope to heal. Lastly, Creator, I pray for myself and and my brothers and sisters, that you bless us with these 7 cultural values: strength, energy, knowledge, wisdom, love, hope, and courage. Guide me that I will walk with balance and dignity and humility, so that I may be as you, a guiding light to all my relations. Thank you.